Charlie Chaplin said that if you look at something in a long shot, it's funny. And if you look at something in a close shot, it's a tragedy. Do you remember the Lenny Bruce joke?
I do not, no.
The Lenny Bruce joke is this. What is the similarity between football players and prostitutes? Answer, they both destroy their bodies for the pleasure of others. And that is funny because this is Max with no knees and no hips and anything on there, and Max is as close to RoboCop as you're ever going to get.
Yeah.
Just because something happened to you, it doesn't define you. What happens to you doesn't define you. It's what you overcome that defines you. Imagine, if you will, an author so desperate for attention, he pretends to smoke a fake cigarette. This is a byproduct of the Stair Pit zone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Stair Pits podcast. If I'm being honest, there's no previous episode since this is the first one, but you say something like, welcome to another exciting episode, so that it seems like we're not doing it the first time. Unfortunately, today we are doing it the first time, so there could be all sorts of little problems along the way. Today, what I've decided to do is to show the fact that I am 100% down with the struggle. I have my only black friend is going to actually interview me today. And this will give everybody the chance to see that I personally can take directions from a non-white person and that I could potentially be vulnerable. So Max Christensen III is a friend of mine. As I said, he's a friend of mine. He also happens to be black. In an attempt to try to get Max to have more meaningful tattoos, since his initials are MC3, it should actually be, 1,103, because that's what it would be in Roman numerals, but we're not there anymore. So he just has the MC3 thing, which I think is much more generic. Of course, the other way, it seems like he's branded, so he probably didn't do with it. But anyway, Max will be asking questions today, and I will do my best to try to answer them with my prop cigarette, which makes me seem like I'm much cooler. So it makes me seem like I like people and I like to smoke, which will hopefully make me feel more relatable to young rebels. Young rebels just like you, only I wear a suit.
Yeah, Robert, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, sir. I mean, as a white guy in his late 60s in a suit and tie here, people might not think you have a ton of diversity in your life.
I actually have none.
But here I sit.
Yeah, no, that's true. It was really good. And I'm so grateful that I found you, because I was able to check a box, and now I feel like I'm there.
Absolutely. I am your version of the DEI hire, as someone who comes from the business world, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what it is. And your performance review is coming up soon,
Okay.
So keep in mind, I could easily replace you.
Yes.
So don't screw it up.
Depending on how this interview goes.
It's a lot rides on
It'll
it.
go one way or the other.
Don't lace a BMW. That's just what I'm telling you.
Okay, yes. But no, Robert, in all seriousness, I am very grateful to know you and have you in my life. And you and I have a special relationship and a special friendship that started back when I was in college.
Indeed.
Right? Mm-hmm. When I was playing football in St. George, Utah, at Utah Tech University, and you decided to donate what I believe is the most valuable thing you can give anyone in life, which is your time. You decided to donate your time to the defensive line at Utah Tech University to come in and mentor us as someone who's been very successful and also lives in our community, to guide us and show us that, hey, the world is a little bit bigger than what happens in these 100 yards of heaven or hell, depending on that day, right? What in the first place made you want to volunteer your hard-earned time to come and speak to a bunch of nobodies, on the defensive line at Utah Tech University and try and mentor us about things in life outside of football?
That's a really good question, Max. I think what happens is when you become an old person, if you look at your life, let's say in 3-act plays, your first act is about who you are and the skills that you developed. Your second act is how do you apply those skills to achieve something. And then the third act is kind of that piece of, now that I've accomplished something, what do I actually do? How do I actually derive that meaning from your life? So my wife and I had moved down to St. George from Oregon so that we could have a third act. I was bored to tears trying to play pickleball for golf, and eventually I thought I would just go to a park bench someplace and feed birds and eventually be picked to death by them after I died. So it seemed like there should be something between picked to death by birds and playing pickleball. There should be an extra chapter or two in there. So somebody explained to me, a mutual friend of ours, explained to me about this mentor program and asked me to come in and, talk to you guys, give a little bit of idea about financial advice. And I don't know, were you even there for the first one?
I might not have been.
No, I don't think you were, because Max had another class because Max was looking at doing something that would actually give him gainful employment versus sitting and listening to idiots talk. So I went in and talked about financial information. The guys had second questions. I came back the second week. Then the guy who was the primary mentor had to go out of town. So he asked if I would just take over the show. And at this point, it's time to talk diversity again, where there's a great Arab proverb, and it says, once the nose of the camel is under the tent, the rest of the camel will soon follow. And because I guess I had the desire to provide value or to try something to people, since I didn't have children of my own, and here was an opportunity to co-op a whole bunch of grandkids, I decided that I would just keep showing up, and I kept showing up. And then when the mentorship program ended after about 5 or 6 weeks, I then decided I would just start showing up at practices. So I would just show up at every practice. And I'd walk around the track and I'd talk to guys. And eventually what I found was here are a whole bunch of young men that have no idea of what they're doing. And they're in that classic example of what happens with heroes, right? A hero is somebody who has a whole bunch of experience in something. And then their life dead ends because the nature, and see, real smokers wouldn't burn their hand like this. They wouldn't use their hand as much. That's the thing. Or they do it. No, it doesn't work because I don't talk as well. So what would happen is they would have their skill set gets about this far, and that's about as far as they can go. And then the hero has to be able to give up this path, take his skills that he's developed, and move them into another path, to go into another direction, to do something. And when I looked at all these guys on the team, there's, you maybe had a slight chance on it. And then another guy that we had who I like to refer to as what's his name because he never calls. I do remember his name, but I don't talk about him because, number one, he doesn't call. And number one, he's white. I already have enough white friends. I don't need any more. So he's what's his name. But what's his name is maybe the only guy that had a chance of playing in the NFL. And everybody else was going to have to do something. And I looked at it as a chance of maybe helping these people transition from athlete into adult.
And you started that back in 2022, I believe, correct?
Yeah, 22, right around that
And we're
time.
sitting here in the year 2026, and you're still continuing this mentorship road. What has made you continue to do that over the span of 4 years?
I think the answer is this, that, generally in my life what I've found is, if you take the other side of the trade, you always win. And by taking the other side of the trade comes from a simple economic fact that if everybody is selling sunglasses, you should be buying them. If everybody is buying sunglasses, you should be selling them. Because if you have the side of the trade that has fewer participants, you have the greatest return. And the answer is nobody else was even looking at these kids. They were all letting them go out and play football. Lenny Bruce was a comedian back in the 50s. Of course, older people might remember him. But he had a great joke. Do you remember the Lenny Bruce joke?
I do not, no.
The Lenny Bruce joke is this. What is the similarity between football players and prostitutes? Answer, they both destroy their bodies for the pleasure of others. And that is funny because
That's a good one.
This
That's
is
a good
Max
one.
with no knees and no hips and anything on there. And Max is as close to RoboCop as you're ever going to get.
Yes.
Other than maybe other people that have just played more.
There you go.
But the answer is these guys are sitting out there and they need to know that they can do more. They need to be able to see themselves as a human. And in many of these times, these kids are looking at it that their entire identity is based upon they're an athlete. And that train is going to run out of track in a very short period of time. And somebody has to be there to get them to stop thinking of it that, when my career as an athlete ends, what'll I do? Oh, I don't know. I'll do something, or some dream that magically the NFL will let people like them play. It's never going to happen. sad, but it's true. The fact is they have to think about other things. They have to think about an alternative future. And growing up, I think I'm good at looking at alternative futures or looking how to make the most of what you have, which is kind of the purpose behind the fake cigarette. In order to look cool, we could have gone out and bought a cigarette, but why when you have something that's a great fake one? I should probably do this. That's Stanislavski for those of you playing at home. I'm acting like I'm actually smoking.
My last year at Utah Tech was the fall of 2023. And we had a D-line coach there by the name of James Cowser, right? Former outside linebacker for the Oakland Raiders. You're a diehard Raiders fan, having grown up there in Northern California and doing what you're doing out there. Cowser referred to you as one of the greatest coaches he'd ever been around, okay? Robert, you've never played high-level football. You've never played high-level sports in general. Yet you have the uncanny ability to not only mentor young athletes and guide them in a direction that brings more value to their lives and young people in general, but you have the ability to connect with them as well. What in your life do you think has given you that ability to connect with people from all walks of life? Because like you said, calling a spade, there was not a lot of white guys in that D-line room or on the football team in general, yet every single person you were able to form a personal connection with and guide them into whatever questions or problems they might have in life. What has given you that ability to connect that way with so many young people these days?
I don't know. No, actually I do. But that was, I think it's a couple of things. Number one is it goes back to something that Charlie Chaplin said, which I think is really good. This is also in the book, so when you come to this part, you can just bypass it. But it's also like in the first page, so I'm not giving anything away. The Charlie Chaplin is a filmmaker, for those of you that don't know who Charlie Chaplin was. He was also a comedian. Charlie Chaplin said that if you look at something in a long shot, it's funny. And if you look at something in a close shot, it's a tragedy. And what he meant by that was that if you're filming somebody walking down the street and they slip on a banana and they fall, if you watch that from across the street, it's extremely funny. If you watch that from up close where you're seeing the person's face contort as their wrist snaps and they fall to the ground in agony, it's a tragedy. And most of life is shot someplace between those two places. It's either a long shot where it's extremely funny and you're not involved, or it's a close-up and every single thing has meaning. I think I shoot the film in both ways. I think I can see the long shot where it's funny, and I can see the short shot where it's going to be a disaster. And the answer is if you can bring humor into people's lives and allow them to see something different, then they have a chance to move with it. The humor is a simple way of telling people the truth that doesn't hurt. That's the entire purpose of humor, is to tell people something that doesn't hurt. And I think that Cowser is a very great man. James Cowser is one of the best defensive line coaches that I've ever seen. The guy is a genius, a wonderful teacher, a perfect technician. And I think I get credit from him in that I only tried to support him. Were you there on our first meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had previous guys that were doing it and that had previously coached the D-line. We had a new guy come in, and I had been a lifelong Raider fan. And I'd also seen James play when he played up at SUU, which those of you that are watching at home and look at the corner of Utah, St. George is here and SUU is here. So we're in the lower left-hand corner of the state. So that was a bad cigarette play. I should have put it here. Anyway, I had followed James's career. He had set records at Southern Utah for sacks. He was just a dynamic player. 3 teams on that small school actually made it to the NFL on their defense. They were just absolutely phenomenal at that time. And so I knew something about it. So I walked into the room. I went over and shook his hand. Everybody else comes in there. And all I wanted to do was to take whatever connectivity and authority that I had as a person and to translate that to the new coach so that the people in the room would see that new coach as someone that they could learn from. So I shared with them a little bit of Kauser's background. And I think James was shocked that I knew as much about him as I knew. And he went from like, what kind of an idiot are you that's, ruining my life by being in here, to how in the hell do you know that much? I didn't know I had a stalker. And I think from that, James is very well written, very well read. He wrote the foreword to the book. I just think he appreciated the fact that I would try to do nothing more than try to elevate the guys. And I could take people that were not doing particularly well in school and get them to do better in school. And I think a lot of that is just by showing people that there's a future. If you give them something to aim at, aggressive people will aim at that and then they'll hit it.
Robert, in your last soliloquy there, you mentioned a book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A new book that's out there in the ether, floating out there in the universe, titled Stair Pits.
Mm-hmm.
And the author there is titled R.A. Thompson. Okay. I know when you're dressed in nice street clothes, you're just Robert, but here in an expensive suit, shine shoes, and a nice tie, you're R.A. Thompson.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about that book. All right. Give us a little background on what was the inspiration for writing this book, Stair Pits. And we know that it's your autobiography, right? Something about your life that is woven. There's a lot of theories and philosophical details of how you viewed life as a young kid growing up in the Bay Area. But what was your inspiration behind writing this book? Because that's kind of what ties us together to begin with. That's why we are sitting here today.
Right, true. In fact, it is. I think that for me, it was an example of I'm walking this path in life where I'm trying to be able to teach these kids something. I'm trying to be a mentor. And I'm trying to tell them you have to do more. You have to be more than just an athlete. And I'm thinking about it, I have to be more than an old person waiting for death. And I kind of look at it that I have maybe 8,000 or 9,000 days left on this planet, and I'm dead. And so the question is, if I only had $8,000 or $9,000 left, I wouldn't waste a single one of them. They'd all be too precious. That's why I have fake cigarettes. So the idea was that if I'm calling these people out to do more, and I'm not trying to do more, then I'm a hypocrite and I lose all credibility. I don't feel that I could look at any of the people in the eye and say, you need to do more when I'm incapable of doing more. I'm unwilling to do more. And then as I found out, looking at some of these guys, that they had never read a book for pleasure, and one of the other mentors never had. And I looked at it from the standpoint that I grew up reading and reading constantly. I mean, I read encyclopedias for the first probably 4 or 5 years of my life that I could read. All I did was just read encyclopedias cover to cover and then just start over and reread them all. And then I was so determined to find out how people in the real world lived that I read biographies of people, and I just wanted to see how real people did things as opposed to the self-destructive way that my parents did things. And then someplace in there I read something by Carl Jung, and he said that all we do is we live out stories. And it occurred to me that I knew a bunch of facts about how things went about, but I had no idea how people interacted or how people did things. I had virtually no people skills at all. I knew a bunch of stuff, but I didn't know how to talk to people. So I started watching commercials, because commercials are the perfect example of how to talk to somebody, how to be able to sell somebody something, and how to show that you're friendly, or how to show that you're a person, or how to transfer information from one person to another. And I watched television. I loved commercials. I watched them forever. And pretty soon you recognize that everybody kind of has a story, and how do you advance that story? And people said, I had all these interesting, weird little screwy stories of me growing up that they'd be funny. I should put them into something. But for me, it was like, yeah, well, who wants to read that? I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write. And pretty soon, I'm 800 pages into, the description of a coffee cup. I don't want to do that. It's stupid. It's insulting to the reader. So what I thought about was, if I could write something and could condense it down, that people would accidentally might want to read it because you're taking away the big excuse. The big excuse is, I don't have time. Well, you have tons of time. The thing is, you just don't allocate it. There are 168 hours in every week. And if you assume that during that time, let's say you're going to sleep for 7 hours a week, 7 hours a day times 8 is 56. So that takes you down to about 200 hours that you can do to just piss away doing anything you want. It's easy to find 7 hours to read an hour a day. It's very easy. You can do it. It means you don't look at your phone as much. You don't play video games as much. You don't search useless little 3-minute videos as much. You actually do something that might lead you to someplace. So my thought was, if I could condense everything down to a limited number of pages, then there's a challenge in that. There's the challenge of writing the book, and then there's the challenge of condensing everything down. And the secret to condensing it down was eliminating the parts that aren't necessary anymore. If you look at books that were written before the 1900s, almost all of those books spend a tremendous amount of time on the description of things because nobody knew what a camel looked like. Nobody had ever seen a camel. And so in today's world, if people want to look at something, they can just, search the internet, and lo and behold, there's a picture of everything that they want to see. So I tried to eliminate as much description as humanly possible, and kind of going back to the idea of pre-television when there was radio shows. The idea was to go back to the idea of radio shows, where on radio shows you would have somebody would say, and the girl walked in wearing a dress that, made you dream forever. Well, even as a kid, you'd listen to something like that. You knew the way that she was dressed was amazing. As an adult, you see it in an entirely different way, but you didn't need to say she came in, in a maroon dress by whatever the designer was with, a sequin pattern of 65%, blah, blah. It means nothing. So I try to condense things down to the simplest elements that I could get. So it's a very short chapter, then chapter like under 550 words, then a top 10 list about what you just read, and then more information about what you previously had read. So it's nothing more than a web page. And if people will go through and will flip through 50 to 100 web pages at a sitting, just going back and forth on something, you have to feed it in a way that people will consume it. That's the real secret. When children ask you, what is it? They're just looking for an excuse to not eat it. So you say, well, what is it? And you say zucchini, and they'll say, oh, I don't like zucchini. Well, they've never tried it. If you ask a child asks you, what is it? And you say delicious, well, then I don't like delicious food. Okay, well, then I'll never feed you ice cream or cake again. Don't worry about it. You can only eat lemons. It'll work great. Or they'll, well, what is it? And you just say, well, it's delicious. Well, what is it? It's delicious. What is it? It's really tasty. And then eventually they have to try it and then determine for themselves what it is. But you don't allow them to make a categorical error where they can decide that they don't want to do it. And so that's kind of the whole purpose of the book, is to keep it as short and simple as humanly possible, to show people that things can happen to you and it won't kill you. In fact, it might accidentally make you stronger. And even more so, that the weird crap that happens to you is pretty much the weird crap that happens to everybody else. And if you have a commonality on the weird crap index, then in fact you can relate to more people because you have more in common than you think. Very few people are that uniquely amazing. Everybody has the same story. You try to learn things and then you fail and then you get better and then you fail and then you get better and you fail. That's story one. Story two is you go along and you try something and you fail and then you don't do anything else. Those are the only two stories. And so I like to believe that you can get people on the first story to learn so they don't fail as much and they can do more. And in the second story, you get them to the fact that the first failure didn't kill them and accidentally they could potentially try again. And the second time they might not fail.
Very deep and wise words there, sir. I appreciate it.
I buy them by the bulk. That's why Costco is great.
Yes, absolutely. All right, R.A. Thompson. I have one more question for you, and it's a loaded one.
Sure.
Okay. We don't want to give everything away in the first podcast. Want everybody to get their money's worth, but I do have one more question for you here. You and I have known each other for years, been friends for years. I know that you've experienced a lot of trials and tribulations in your life. People are now going to get to open that window and take a glimpse into your life and see all the things you have gone through as well in this book and others that are going to come out after this. Okay. But let me ask you this. With this first book, Stair Pits, all right, I know this is going to be a hard one. If you had to pick one central theme, because this is a book where whoever reads it is going to take a different theme from it. Oh, this is what the book's about. This is what the book's about. I know you talked about your brother and your wife view this book in very different lenses because of how they know you, okay? A lot of people are going to read this book who have never met you, and they will find a different central theme of exactly what the book is about, okay? If you were to target the main central theme of the book or what you would want people to take away from it, what would that be if you could answer that?
Get over yourself. I mean, that'd be the number one thing, right? Is that just because something happened to you, it doesn't define you. What happens to you doesn't define you. It's what you overcome that defines you. And that if you look at the story of mankind, it isn't the guy did great and then he stopped. It was the guy did great and then he did greater. Or the guy did nothing and then he did great. That humanity is defined by creation. I mean, if you look at it, one of the most important lines of all of Scripture is we are created in God's image. If we are created in God's image, then we are, in fact, creators. And if we are creators and we are not creating, then we are denying our own existence. And people today are more consumer and more passive than they are creator. And we need to get back to the point that our life is defined by what we create, not by our specialness. Specialness without creativity is a wasted life. Generic but can contribute and can do something is special. That we actually go forward based upon the creation of others.
You are an amazing example of someone who your circumstance does not define your life. What happened to you is not who you are, right? You were able to create your own future. You're able to create your own success. And that's kind of what this book, like you said, shows everybody. Get over yourself, right? Don't wallow in self-pity when it comes to the bad things that happen to you, because bad things happen to everyone, right? But you are living, breathing proof that you can overcome and become as successful in life as you want to if you are willing to put in the time, effort, and work for it. So
right. I do believe that. And I just, I think that that's an important piece is if you look at it, if all we do every day is just reflect the specific piece of God's love that we were created to reflect. That's all we have to do. That there's 9 billion of us on this planet. And if we each go out of the way to use our skills, gifts, and talents to live in grace and harmony with others, if that's all that we're doing, then the world becomes a better place because we all have a unique capacity to do something. And we don't have to do something for everybody. But if you can surround yourself with the people who can best benefit from the things that you do, you enrich their lives. And more importantly, you enrich your own. And only by doing that do you have a chance to move closer to God. And I think that's the ultimate goal, at least for old people, as we're getting dangerously close to moving closer to God. We think about it a little bit more, and we should actually act that way.
R.A. Thompson, what an honor and a blessing it was for me to get the chance to interview you on this first episode of Stair Pits. I'm excited to do future episodes where we will dive into specific parts of the book. This was just kind of an overarching generality of who I am, who you are, what the main theme of the book is, and then we'll dive into more detailed aspects of the specific book in a later date. But thank you seriously for giving me the opportunity to sit down in front of a microphone. You and I have had a ton of conversations throughout life. This is the first time we've ever done it recorded behind a microphone, and it's just an honor and a blessing to get to continue this.
One suggestion for the future things, just looking at it. Now, since you did bring a copy of the book, if let's say the book was faced like this, then people might have been able to see it. And since you did bring a copy of the book, it was unfortunate that we didn't face it in some way that people then might see it and accidentally try to buy it. But this is what it looks like, and this is what it looks like upside down. Thank you very much, Max. You're very kind. It's a pleasure to know you, sir.
Absolutely.